I'm stuck in something I don't fully understand, and honestly, I'm terrified. Let me start from the beginning. About 5 years ago, my next-door neighbor, Greg Gregory, to most came knocking, pale and shaken. His teenage daughter, Emily, had vanished without a trace. He reported her missing immediately. It was all over the news, every channel. My wife and I were devastated. We tried to be there for Greg and his wife, Melissa, offering help whatever we could. As the months turned into years with no sign of Emily, it felt like Greg and Melissa had slowly accepted the unthinkable. We never had the heart to ask if they ever found a body. But something about them changed. Melissa grew silent and distant, and Greg became more jittery, like a man constantly haunted by shadows. Fast forward to last week. I was taking out the trash when Greg appeared at my door. "Hey, can I borrow your garden hoe?" he asked, eyes darting nervously. Without hesitation, I handed it over. He mumbled something about doing work in the backyard and promised to return it by the next day. Later that evening, from my upstairs window, I saw him digging a massive hole in his yard. He looked exhausted. He's pushing 60, but kept going. Feeling a surge of neighborly duty, I grabbed my own hoe and headed over to help. As I stepped into his yard, I called his name. Greg stopped, looked up, and for a moment, relief washed over his face. Then, suddenly, his expression twisted into something cold. "No," he said sharply, eyes darkening. "I don't want you touching that." He pointed to the gate like I was some intruder. I was stunned. I left without a word. I couldn't stop watching. Greg dug for another 30 minutes, then stopped and looked nervously toward the surrounding houses. Then he caught me peering through my window. His glare froze me in place, so I backed away casually. Hours later, at exactly 2:13 a.m., I heard the scrape of the hoe against dirt again. The street was pitch black, so I slipped outside and crept to the fence. Greg was digging fiercely, every stroke frantic and desperate. When he finally went inside, I took my chance. I climbed into his yard and peered into the hole. The faint moonlight revealed a torn piece of a black plastic bag buried beneath the soil. I stared at the door, then back at the hole. Twice more, I approached it, fighting the urge to uncover the rest. But the thought of what I might find paralyzed me. Suddenly, footsteps. Greg was back, not with the hoe, but heading around the house, then vanished. The next morning, the hole was completely filled in. Oddly, Greg's old truck was parked on the street, not in the driveway. I have no idea what he buried, or if it's related to Emily, or worse, if he just moved whatever it was somewhere else. I haven't told a soul. Not my wife. Not a single neighbor. And I don't know if I should. Greg never returned my garden hoe. Worse, yesterday, as I glanced out my window, I caught him staring straight at me from one of his blinds. The moment he saw me, he shut it tight, midday. I don't know what to do. But one thing is clear: he may not safe. And neither is anyone else on this street. I've lived in 3 different houses throughout my life. The first with my family for 15 years, the second for another 7, and the third where I am new completely on my own. But the memory I'm about to share comes from that very first home, and it still gives me chills every time I think about it. It was in the final months before we moved out. I was 15, and my little brother, Sam, was just 10. Our family had never been especially close with the neighbors. We kept to ourselves. But I remember the 2 boys who lived next door, Nate and Dylan. We barely spoke to them over the years, which made what happened next all the more bizarre. One afternoon, Sam and I were outside shooting hoops in the driveway. That's when Dylan Teller, older looking, maybe my age, walked over. It was strange. He hadn't said more than 5 words to us our entire lives. But that day, he started up a conversation like we were old friends. I don't remember the exact words, but the first thing he asked was, "So, is it true you guys are moving?" I answered for both of us. I was used to doing the talking. Dylan was quiet, calm, almost too calm. At the end of the conversation, he invited me to go with him and Nate the next day to shoot BB guns down by the river in the woods. I agreed. It was the weekend, and I had nothing better to do. Sam asked if he could tag along. Dylan hesitated, then said, "Yeah, sure." But something about the way he said it made my stomach feel uneasy. The next day, around dusk, they showed up at our door. Dressed head to toe in camouflage, Nate and Dylan looked like they were heading into combat. Nate carried a duffel bag that looked heavy. We didn't waste teamly slipped out before our parents could ask questions. As we walked down the street, the 4 of us barely said a word. I remember looking at Sam and exchanging a smirk. We were trying not to laugh, it all just felt so dramatic. But once we got into the woods, the vibe changed completely. Dylan dropped the bag with a heavy thud and unzipped it. Nate, meanwhile, broke a thick branch off a tree and hurled it into the river with so much aggression it startled Sam. Then Dylan handed us the BB guns. Only they weren't. "They're real," Dylan muttered. "Not toys." I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. But when Nate pulled out a pistol and started firing into the trees across the river, I realized with sinking horror he wasn't kidding. I grabbed the gun from Sam's hands and told them we weren't okay with this and that we were leaving. They stared at us stone-faced. Nate stopped shooting. Dylan clenched his jaw, muttered a curse, and gave us a look I won't forget. That night, over dinner, we told our parents the boys next door were strange. But we didn't mention the real guns. Part of me didn't want to believe it happened. That night, I woke up to a cold breeze hitting my face. My window was wide open. I was frozen in place, paralyzed when I felt something metallic press against the back of my head. A whisper. "Shh." It was Dylan. He leaned in, close enough for me to smell the mud on his clothes. "If you tell anyone, especially my dad, about the guns," he said, "I'll come back and kill you, and your whole family." I nodded. I don't know how, but I managed to stay calm. My voice barely audible, I replied, "Okay?" He gave the back of my head a shove with the barrel, then slipped out the window. After that night, things only got worse. Every few nights, I'd see one of them, Nate or Dylan, standing in their upstairs window, just watching me. Or worse, watching my little brother sleep. One night, a rock hit my window at 1 a.m. I opened it slowly and saw Dylan pointing a gun up at me from the yard below. My heart dropped. I thought it was over. Then he burst out laughing. Nate, too. I heard one of them call me a little expletive. The harassment didn't stop. They'd whistle at us from bushes. Leave dead squirrels on her porch. One night, Sam came into my room shaking, saying someone had been tapping on his window for 10 minutes straight. Then, finally, mercifully, the move came. We never spoke to Dylan or Nate again. We never told our parents what really happened. Not the threats, not the window, not the gun. And now, all these years later, I still don't know what they were really planning, what they were capable of. But I'm certain of one thing. We got out just in time. At the time I'm writing this, it happened just 2 weeks ago. I'm fresh out of college, living alone for the first time, and honestly, I hate my neighbors. All of them, but especially the ones next door. I live in a rundown area, it's all I can afford. And with that comes less than ideal neighbors. On one side, it's non-stop music shaking the walls. But on the other side, it's something worse. There are two women living in the house next to mine. One is in her 60s, cold, distant, completely unapproachable. The other is a bit younger and clearly has severe mental health issues. I have no idea what their relationship is, mother and daughter, caregiver and patient, sisters. I honestly don't know. But what I do know is that their presence is disturbing. I often sit on my porch after work, quiet moments to myself. But sometimes I'll look over and see the older woman trying to restrain the other during one of her episodes, arms flailing, screeching, rocking violently back and forth. Sometimes she'd even point at me while mumbling incoherently. It was enough to make me retreat inside on more than one occasion. Then, one night, everything escalated. I had to be up early for work, so I got into bed a little after 10. But the screaming next door wouldn't stop. It was worse than usual. The younger woman was having a full-blown meltdown, screaming, slamming things, shrieking in pure rage. The older woman yelled back, helpless. It went on for an hour. Finally, I snapped. I stormed over and pounded on their door. The older woman opened it just enough to glare at me and spat out, "What the hell do you want?" I tried to keep my cool. I asked politely if they could please keep the noise down. She tilted her head, gave me this slow, condescending stare like I was a bug on her windshield. Then, out of nowhere, the younger woman stormed into view, screaming, "How dare you! How dare you!" over and over. The older woman held her back while she thrashed toward me. Bin slam. Door in my face. I stood there stunned. No apology. No attempt to explain. Just that. But when I got back home, the silence was instant. I actually managed to fall asleep. For a little while. I woke up suddenly, feeling like I hadn't even been asleep for more than an hour. Checked the time, 3:00 a.m. I sighed, rolled over, ready to drift off again, but I heard something. A noise faint, coming from downstairs. A shuffle, maybe. I sat up, listened. Nothing. Just my imagination, I figured. I lay back down. But then another noise. Closer this time. My heart started pounding. I reached for my phone in the dark, not turning on the flashlight just yet. I scanned the room with just the dim glow of the screen. Nothing in the corners. No movement. Then I heard it. Breathing. Low. Labored. Coming from the edge of the bed. I slowly turned my head and saw it. A dark, hunched shape was crouched at the corner of my bed. Barely lit by my phone, I couldn't see details until the screen shifted just enough to reveal her face. Her face. It was the younger woman from next door, wide-eyed, unblinking, her mouth trembling in a silent scream. And then she shrieked. Loud, deranged, inhuman. Like an animal set on fire, I screamed too. Bolted out of bed, slipped on the floor, scrambled to my feet as she lunged toward me. I slammed the bedroom door shut behind me and tore downstairs, locking the door at the bottom of the stairs as she pounded against it. Still screeching, I called the police in a panic. By the time they arrived, she was still at the top of the stairs, yelling things I couldn't understand. When I told the cops she was my neighbor and mentally unstable, the older woman finally showed up. She pleaded with the officers, insisting her daughter was just confused and begging them to let her go. But the cops said they had to take her in for at least the night. Then one officer asked me, "Do you want to press charges?" I hesitated. As I stood there, The older woman locked eyes with me, and the look she gave me was pure venom. I've never felt so hated in my life. I told them no, I wouldn't press charges. Her stare didn't change. They loaded the daughter into the cruiser and drove off. The older woman walked back to her house without a word. But 5 minutes later, I saw her leave in her car. I don't know where she went. I don't want to know. All I know is they still live next door. And I don't feel safe anymore. I keep my doors locked. I sleep with a chair against my bedroom door. Every bump in the night makes me freeze. I don't know what she was planning to do to me that night, but I do know this. Next time, I might not wake up in time.